Sonbol, Part 1. The Breach. Everyone had known the invasion was coming for years now. The Smock, as we called them, in the nearest utterance in English to their smacking vocalizations, had made contact with Earth 5 full years before they were due to arrive. In fact, that was one of the more unsettling things about them. They had announced their forthcoming arrival and their intentions of conquest in such a way as to allow us half a decade to prepare. That warning demonstrated confidence in their abilities to dominate and a major lack of confidence in humanity's ability to defend itself and its planet. That confidence was not misplaced either. We'd only just sent our first exploratory missions to Mars, and that was fraught with anger between the whopping 2 nations that had collaborated on the project. So, the chances of us combating or repelling the Smock seemed very slight indeed when that fateful message had first come in. That being said, humanity often surprises even itself. Within 3 weeks of contact, the UN had drafted a peace accord that all member nations agreed to sign. It was a unanimous adoption in the Security Council, and then again in the General Assembly. In another 3 weeks' time, the UN members had convinced the more solitary, lone-standing nations of the planet to sign on too. So, after just under 2 months, the Earth was poised to stand as one. On June 4th, 2051, the Dublin Accords were signed, and work began among the peoples of the world in preparation for our defense. 1 full year into preparation saw various world academies pop up for those that would be willing to serve in the upcoming battles. I quickly signed up. Not because I'm a natural athlete or lover of war or brave man or anything. Rather, I've always had a healthy dose of wanderlust, and this opportunity would take me to space. Space! I simply couldn't pass it up. Only the rich kids from university ever got to vacation out to the orbitals. In my estimation, this was the only way I'd ever break orbit in my lifetime. So, I pushed my terror of fighting and dying down pretty deep within myself, started forming some deluded narrative to convince myself this was my destiny, and was one of the first people in my entire state to sign up. Everyone in Staffen Ridge, Tennessee thought maybe I'd gone mad. Well, not everyone. Some thought I was looking to commit suicide by extraterrestrial. Neither was true, of course, unless thirsting for more in life is madness, which it very well could be. The Global Confederation, as it came to be called, placed the academies across the planet for equal access. The process for assignment, though, was based on test scores, skills, and physical achievements during the 2-week initial pre-boot camp. As it turned out, my not being a god on the fields or on the courts, the ice, the gym, wherever, did not preclude me from achieving in the GC program. The practice of taking an amalgamation of scores on a variety of subjects actually helped my score beyond measure. I got a 4 out of 5 on my athletics testing, which surprised me. I got several 2 out of 5 marks on things like mechanics, electrical, spatial reasoning, and higher order maths. However, I had some of the highest scores in the nation in linguistics, conflict resolution, critical thinking, abstract considerations, and a great many more subjects in that vein. Those were straight 5 out of 5s. Because my high scores mattered far more in the weighted averaging, I ended up becoming quite the desirable candidate. A great deal of superfluous detail aside, I pretty much got the privilege of picking which training academy I would attend. My wanderlust had long seen me traveling the world, but my heart had been left in Ireland when I was roughly 16. So I chose the rather important Dublin Academy. In truth, the facilities were just outside of Dublin, but this academy, often referred to as Academy Prime, or just Prime, was named for the city, its being the very first academy formed in the wake of the Dublin Accords. Moreover, since Greater Dublin had become the world's newest, most prolific technology hub in the late 2020s, having Academy Prime there made even more sense on top of the other reasons. Now, I, of course, didn't just choose Prime out of nostalgia for a bygone high school trip. No. This training facility produced leaders. There was no formal agreement that the officer corps would come heavily from Prime, but that's how things always shook out. Month after month, Prime churned out the leaders that would take command both in training exercise and in the coming battles ahead. By the time I made it across the Atlantic, almost 2 full years had passed since the smock had reached out to Earth. That gave me just 3 years to become the best possible defender of humanity I could be. That was quite the motivator, at least in my eyes. Having grown up in a fairly conservative region of the States, I must admit that I was a bit taken aback when I showed up to my assigned room, number 33, in my assigned hall, Primrose Hall, and I was informed that my quad would be co-ed, 2 guys and 2 gals. This wasn't exactly uncommon at the smaller regional training facilities or the various academies, but the conservative bent that had been beaten into my psyche from a young age marveled at it, nonetheless. I met all 3 of my roommates at the same time, as I was the last to check in with my handful of allowed belongings and my various uniform implements in hand. First, I shook the hand of a wiry older woman with raven black hair and shockingly cool blue eyes. From my estimation, she was around 5'2", 50 years old, and she was in amazing shape for any age. Barbara McCarthy, Navigator. I knew this because I'd done my homework. Like any good would-be leader, I'd gone over the dossiers of these people that I'd be sharing my working hours and future fighting hours with. That being said, I'd not realized we'd be living together too. Assignments were one thing, this was another. Co-ed bunks aside, that was a lot of time to be spent between the 4 of us. I realized that I'd been lost in thought and was staring blankly at McCarthy, still shaking her hand. I mumbled some platitude and moved on down the line. Next, I took in a man about my size, 5 foot 10 inches on a good day. Broad shoulders. A ready smile. Again, a bit older than me. He had already grayed heavily and was missing most of his hair on the crown of his head. He couldn't have been too much older than Barbara, though. He had apparently lived a bit harder than her. Even so, the strength in the man's arms were nothing I'd want to tangle with. Anton Fitzgerald, pilot and security specialist. Last, I was greeted by a pale goddess of a woman, her sea-green eyes framed by velvety curls of brown. Her body was toned and tight, but not in the sleek, harsh way of Barbara's and not in the bulky, corded way of Anton's. Something else. She smiled widely, but wasn't quick to meet my gaze. She was shy then. Hyacinth Rose Flowers, engineer, master electrician, astrophysicist, and communications liaison, among other things. That she was gorgeous was enough to take me aback. That she'd apparently qualified in every testing subject save hand-to-hand combat was an added bit to knock me on my heels. And that name of hers? Wow. Hyacinth Rose Flowers. When she said it, her words carried the weight of many a laugh. Still, I couldn't help but snicker a bit, which brought her tucked chin up, and her eyes shot to meet mine, and our handshake intensified. Call me Hi. No, my parents didn't hate me. Yes, I'm amazing at botany and horticulture. Yes, I realize I'm living in Primrose Hall. On top of it, does that about cover it, Mr. McAllister? Well, alright then. She knew my name. It looks like she'd done her homework too. No, I'd given it to them already. Wow. It was quite the whirlwind of a day. I made some defensive gestures, apologized, and introduced myself formally in the manner we'd been asked to at orientation before leaving our respective regional facilities. Hi, I'm Jason McAllister, 32. Trained at Tennessee Unit 514 in the USA. Top 3 rankings: linguistics, command procedure, and conflict resolution. The other 3 were clearly thrown off by my more formal, by-the-book introduction, and they quickly followed suit by responding in that vein despite the handshakes having already been shared around the room. Barman McCarthy, 54, trained at Killarney Unit 616. Top 3 rankings: navigation, fuel chemistry, and non-standard battle tactics. My eyes widened at that last specialty. I'd have never guessed. The woman was in shape and all, but non-standards? Yikes. Non-standards specialists were nothing to be trifled with. Anton Fitzgerald, 52. Trained at Belfast Unit 223. Top 3 rankings: infantry tactics, non-grav weaponry, and grav and non-grav pilotry. Anton was a jovial but dangerous man then. Additionally, the rigor he'd had to have gone through to even get into pilot's school, much less pass through with those specialties, was beyond imagining. Anton was a smart cookie and a cool cucumber under pressure on top of the rest. Hyacinth High Rose Flowers, 24. Trained at Boston Unit 27C, ranked Omega. Holy shit. That hadn't been in her file. Dear God. Ranked Omega? That meant she could do anything, really. She would have had to rank out at everything. I stuttered, trying to find words to ask her questions to further explain this, when the intercom system came on. All newly arrived trainees, please report to mess for initial inspection and orientation to facilities, duties, and assignments. Repeat. All newly arrived trainees, please report to mess for initial inspection and orientation to facilities, duties, and assignments. My questions would have to wait then. Without thinking about it, I tossed my bags down on the nearest bunk that looked unclaimed, a rather easy thing to surmise, seeing as 3 of the 4 already had some creases in the sheets and bedrolls. And, for the first time, I realized that they were all in their deep green jumpsuits befitting someone attending Academy Prime. Shit. I was still wearing my brick red regionals. I stripped off as quickly as I could, jostling about and hopping into my own suit. McCarthy and Fitzgerald turned their backs, giving me a bit of privacy, which I appreciated, even if we all would be seeing one another in far less than our skivvies in the very near future. Hyacinth Rose Flowers stood unmoving as I zipped my suit up, not exactly staring, but certainly making it known that she wouldn't adjust her world to suit mine. With my new suit on, and my new roommates and soon-to-be fighting companions in tow, we all ran down the hall together to see what the next 3 years of our lives would bring. Thank you for listening to part 1 of Sonbol, titled The Breach. This story is one that is near and dear to me, and, as you might surmise from the title, it will be coming to you in multiple parts. This portion of the story has numerous backing tracks behind it, coming from both freesound.org and the Free Music Archive. All of the backing tracks, save the next to last one, come from the artist Gelsonic. and were taken from the Free Music Archive. The tracks are titled The Last Whale, coming from the album Various Moods, Sea Song, and No Doubt, the latter two coming from the album Various Moods 2. All of these tracks from Gelsonic are being used under Creative Commons Attribution 4.0 international licenses. The track from freesound.org was uploaded by creator Romero Grande and is being used under a CC0 1.0 Universal Public Domain Dedication license. Thank you to both of these artists and both of these web collectives for making these works available for artists like me to further lift up their own work. Next week, keep an eye open for part 2 of Sonbol, titled Percench. But for now, stick around for the second story this week, a nice little mini foray into horror titled The Leash.